Africa to organize today's event and to provide an engaging platform for agri-food entrepreneurs and to help you connect with one another and with other stakeholders in the South African ecosystem. We also hope that you'll gain access to critical business insights, updates that will be useful, and learn about new resources that are available to help you with your businesses. We are aware that SMEs are the lifeblood of our continent's food system, and we believe that this event is extremely timely and important to drive the transformation of the food ecosystem in Africa. Without further ado, what I'd like to do to get us started is to share the agenda and take you through what we'll be covering today. After the welcome and introductions, we will have opening remarks. We will have a Nourishing Africa anniversary video to share with you. We'll then have a brief overview of Nourishing Africa. We'll have a interesting and interactive panel discussion, and we'll have a Q&A that allows you to ask your questions of the panelists. That will be followed by our keynote address. And then we'll have a very interesting one-on-one engagement with one of our local entrepreneurs to talk about how he, in this instance, it's a he, how he built his business. We will then have instructions for you. So we will move to a breakaway session or set of sessions, which will allow you to network and to have more interactive discussion in areas of particular interest for each of you. We'll then have closing remarks and a vote of thanks. I mentioned, and you all will have looked at the program overview, and you know that we've tried to have a very dynamic lineup of experts who will be sharing with you this morning and into the early afternoon. The sessions are meant to be interactive. We want you to have an opportunity to ask questions and to get feedback from the panel of experts that we've lined up. Throughout the program, we also encourage you to tweet and post about this event in your social media channels. And we'd like you to use the hashtag Nourishing Africa Virtual Roadshow. I'll say that again because it's a bit of a mouthful. Hashtag Nourishing Africa Virtual Roadshow. And also hashtag Equipping Agribusinesses. So those are the two hashtags I want you to please remember. And please feel free to also tag us at ABG, Nourishing Africa, and the Wakanda Food Accelerator. Before we move further, I'd like to take you through a few housekeeping points that'll be on the screen. So in terms of your wanting to ask questions, please use the expression buttons that you find at the bottom of the screen. Use the hand raise if you're interested in asking a question, the thumbs up and the wave, etc., to contribute or call for attention. All of the attendees will be able to participate in all relevant phases of the event. So kindly use the chat to contribute and send your questions. And please ensure to address your questions to a particular speaker. This is during the panel discussion and during the one-on-one discussions after. Please refrain from posting things in the chat that are unrelated to the event. And when you're allowed to speak during the Q&A and the breakout sessions, we request that you kindly respect the time and the group's time and keep your comments brief and to the point. The Nourishing Africa team members are available to provide links and guidance in the chat box. So if you have any questions, please do use the chat box. So now we will commence our program. We have a quick poll. Please take the time to provide your response. We're keen to know where the participants in today's event are hailing from. And use the scroll bar on the right because there's more than just this one question. So you can scroll down and you can see all the questions before you. Don't forget to get to all of the questions. And the beauty of this is that the answers are right in front of you. So in terms of where we're from, most of us are hailing from right here in South Africa. We have a number of agri-food entrepreneurs, which is excellent, but we also have stakeholders from civil society, NGO community, accelerators and incubators, SME networks, and also development partners. Key aspect of why we're all here. So networking seems to be a big part of what brings us together this morning, connecting with other entrepreneurs and stakeholders in the landscape. Also learning about new opportunities, resources, and updates in the sector is a very compelling reason for a number of you to join us. Gaining new insights for one's business, and then also learning more about Nourishing Africa. So we're very excited to host you all and definitely want to be able to help you achieve the goals that you've set. The poll will stay open for a little bit longer, but we'll go ahead and get started with the program. So we have our opening remarks from Ms. Leseko Serolong. I'm not going to read her bio because you've had it in front of you for the last few minutes. But I'd like, without further ado, to give the floor to Ms. Serolong. Over to you.
Okay, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I don't know if you can see me.
Yes, we can.
Oh, yes. Welcome to Nourishing Africa's South African tour. I'm actually quite excited about this because I'm an ambassador of Nourishing Africa and consider myself a family member of Nourishing Africa. And the work that Nourishing Africa is doing to really support entrepreneurship in the continent is really remarkable. And as an entrepreneur myself, and you know, as an entrepreneur and someone who works with food entrepreneurs like on the ground, it's been great to see how Nourishing Africa has really provided support, you know, to farmers all across the continent, especially during these challenging times of like COVID, where, you know, a meeting in person is almost like impossible. So I'm so glad that, you know, Nourishing Africa is leveraging technology to be able to bring all the farmers together and agripreneurs beyond the borders of South Africa. I'm the founder of Bokamoso Impact Investments, which is an advisory services. We work with government to provide, you know, advice on ways they can better support emerging farmers in South Africa. We also work with private companies such as Thornick, which is the second largest cattle company in South Africa. We write impact reports as well. We've established an Agri accelerator in the Kalahari, where the focus has been to really be on the ground and support farmers by providing skills, mentorship, as well as access to markets. From that experience, I then founded Bokamoso Foods, which is a food processing and packaging company. We provide third-party packaging services because we saw that there was a niche area, you know, in the food sector. And as we know, manufacturing provides a lot of opportunity for job creation and skills transfer, especially to a lot of young people. And I'm so proud to share with you that we built our first world-class factory in the village. Our vision has always been to bring opportunities closer to people and bring manufacturing to and industrialization to rural people. So our factory is based in the northwest province of South Africa, where we manufacture different food products and beverages such as tea and coffee. We do custom blends for various clients in the hotel industry, wholesale, airlines, and we also manufacture beehives from scratch from the other side of our factory and package our honey under our label, Beloved Honey. We do all of this because we see that clearly there's like a gap and an opportunity in the market for value add, and for us to also provide opportunities to showcase South African products and to change the narrative as well about products that are coming out of Africa. And I'm currently in the US, and I'm always amazed at just walking into a grocery store, just how many products there are like on the shelves, and even thinking about the potential that we have, as Africans, to package our products well, make sure that we have all the information we need, from labeling to design, to make sure that our products are very attractive. And with today's topic, which is equipping agri SMEs, you realize that a lot of agripreneurs on the ground and food entrepreneurs, they need still a lot of support, and these are critical, to the flourishing of agribusinesses in the continent. So through the Nourishing Africa platform, we were able to partner with an organization called Agripreneurship, led by Anne, Brulin, as well as Stephen. We've just completed a 10-week intensive business readiness course to 260 South African emerging farmers. And it's been incredible. And some of these farmers have been farming, for generations. And it's just been incredible to see the transformation, making sure that, the farmers get the financial, skills to do the modeling. Those are critical, in building our agribusinesses. Pitching, that's very important, because as farmers grow, they need to learn these critical skills so that they're able to tell what their businesses does well to different audiences abroad and locally as well. And accounting and bookkeeping came, became like the top, topic during our 10-week discussion, where farmers were still struggling, to do their books and accounting. So with what Nourishing Africa is doing is that, it's providing all these platforms where farmers and food entrepreneurs are struggling. They can easily access services, and they can easily, get information on how they can improve their businesses, as well as share knowledge on how they can market their businesses beyond the borders of Africa. As I mentioned, one of the products that we're doing is honey. Currently in South Africa, we are importing over 75% of our honey from abroad, and most of it, it's blended. And we know that a lot of food fraud happens with products like honey and milk, and olive oil. So we actually see this as an opportunity to help develop, rural farmers across South Africa by, equipping them with skills, in carpentry to build the beehives, as well as make sure that, we collect raw, real African honey that we can then, export abroad. So I'm really excited for all of you guys here today. Thank you for making time for this great session. I know that it'll be great, and I love the fact that some of you guys mentioned networking, because that's how we grow, and making use of the opportunity as well to share about ourselves and share about ways we can grow. So thank you so much, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you very much for a very enlightening opening set of remarks. And I'm now going to ask Ife Umuna, the co-CEO of Nourishing Africa, to join us and help introduce the video that you'll see, and then give us a bit of an oversight of Nourishing Africa. Ife, over to you.
There are emerging groups of dynamic, visionary, and committed entrepreneurs driving the African agriculture and food landscapes. Yet many of them struggle for survival in very difficult and often hostile environments. Agripreneurs, as we refer to them, struggle to access funding, advertising opportunities, data, information, and markets when trying to scale their businesses. As a direct response to their needs, Sahel Consulting Agriculture and Nutrition Limited, in partnership with the MasterCard Foundation, launched Nourishing Africa in September 2019. 11 months later, Nourishing Africa was fully incorporated and became an independent organization on the 11th of June 2020, with the mandate of equipping and connecting Agri SMEs across Africa. As such, Nourishing Africa is a knowledge and membership platform aimed at helping agri-food entrepreneurs from farm to fork scale their businesses across the continent. Currently supporting over 1,000 African agri-businesses across 34 countries, Nourishing Africa's mission is to drive the profitable and sustainable growth of the African agriculture and food landscapes by attracting, empowering, equipping, connecting, and celebrating over 1 million dynamic and innovative young agri-food entrepreneurs. The virtual hub serves as a platform for these stakeholders to accelerate their work, connect with each other, and celebrate their successes on the continent. Since its inception, Nourishing Africa has built a virtual community of agri-food entrepreneurs where they connect directly with each other and gain access to opportunities including funding, data, learning resources, events, technology, talent, input, and other resources and tools that they need to scale their businesses. To date, the organization has successfully nominated over 60 agri-businesses across the continent for funding and other support critical to their growth. Nourishing Africa has facilitated over 50 strategic offline and virtual convenings and trainings for agri-food entrepreneurs across Africa, partnering with relevant organizations to deliver tailored content in the entrepreneurs area of focus. Nourishing Africa also partners with development institutions to develop and implement support programs for agri-food businesses across Africa, focusing on helping these businesses to build successful models that ensures profitability, sustainability, and social and economic impact in their communities. In December 2020, Nourishing Africa, in partnership with the MasterCard Foundation and the United States African Development Foundation, launched the Entrepreneur Support Program, designed to support over 2,000 MSMEs across the Nigerian agriculture and food landscapes to rebuild and strengthen their businesses through training, small grants, and ongoing support, a model we hope to replicate across the continent. Nourishing Africa prides itself in practicing what it preaches. The organization is youth and women, which leverages ag tech and digital innovation, driven by Africa's vibrant entrepreneurs to ensure that the continent nourishes itself, is food secure, and becomes a net exporter of food by 2050.
Hello, I'm Ifeoma, co-founder and co-CEO.
And I'm Rahmat Afunjo, co-founder and co-CEO at Nourishing Africa.
We would like to take this opportunity to thank all of those who have made the first year an impactful and memorable one for all of us at Nourishing Africa.
To our partners, our board, our team, and most importantly, our incredible members, thank you for believing in us, for working with us, and for continuing to serve as inspiration and motivation to keep going and creating greater impact on our continent.
We look forward to celebrating our 5th, our 10th, and our 50th anniversary with all of you by our side, truly transforming the African agriculture and food landscape.
Thank you all.
Good afternoon. I see my video is not working. Let me switch it on. Good afternoon. My name is Ifeoma. I am the co-CEO of Nourishing Africa, and I'd just like to thank you all for joining us today. We're very excited to be sharing the knowledge and wisdom of the great panelists and entrepreneurs and speakers that we have today. As someone who has grown up in South Africa for the vast majority of my life, I'm very excited to see that we are making strides in connecting and equipping South African agribusinesses across the country as itself. And just based on what Lesego had said, we're very, very excited to connect with all of you to understand what are the challenges and barriers and how we can help you in really scaling your businesses and seeing you all become net exporters of food and being able to become food secure and really thriving within your communities, both locally and internationally. So on behalf of Nourishing Africa, I look forward to engaging further today. And if you are not a Nourishing Africa member, we ask that you join us in this journey. We're very excited about it. And we know that collectively, through partnerships and engagement and through listening to one another, we really will be able to transform the agriculture and food space in Africa. Thank you. Back to you, Michael.
Thanks very much, Iffy. And that was a very informative video for all of us to watch. We're actually now going to have our first panel discussion. The theme of the discussion is connecting and equipping agri-food SMEs in Africa, the role of stakeholders. And we have a very dynamic panel that have joined us. We have Ms. Mabatu Portia Morodu, who's the co-founder of the Village Market. We also have Ms. Dimakatso Sekoto, who goes by Nono, very well known in the South African ecosystem of agripreneurs and agricultural specialists. She's the sector lead, Agribusiness, for the Agribusiness Network, the AL for Agribusiness Network. Mr. Miles Kubeka, the CEO founder of Wakanda Food Accelerator and one of the co-organizers of today's event. And Mr. Thavan Naidu, who's the regional representative of the Private Financing Advisory Network, PFAN. So I'd like to ask all of the panelists to please turn on your videos so that we'll all know who's whom. And again, in the interest of time, I won't read what is right in front of you, but Nono is our first panelist. And I'd like you to give us your thoughts, Nono, on the theme of connecting and equipping agri-food SMEs in Africa, the role of stakeholders.
Good morning, Michael. How are you?
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm very excited always to participate at discussions like this and to be able to contribute around all the work that we do on the ground with regards to supporting SMEs in the sector. I just want to confirm, are you able to see my video? Because it was, okay. It was.
Yes, we can see you.
Great, perfect. Great, so you guys, I was given 3 thoughts around how to answer the question of how it is that we're supporting SMEs in the sector. I work for African Leadership Academy as the lead for AL for Agribusiness, which is a network that supports young leaders who are building and getting into agricultural sector. And we're helping them uncover opportunities that lie around the sector across the continent. And so my focus today is to just let you know how we're supporting some of the SMEs to actually connect them with our young leaders. What's important about understanding, opportunities that exist in the sector is how do we access them? That's probably been the biggest challenge around, SMEs growing in the sector, is how do you access these finance? Because we hear that there is finance, we hear there are opportunities, we hear there is a market, but it's about how do we actually access, which is the actual issue. And in our sector, what we do is we actually want to make sure that we understand our network first. So that's kind of the most important way to be able to understand and which are the opportunities that are going to be readily available, readily accessible and will be relevant to our network. And so the most important thing about coaching and understanding our network is kind of the first way of us being able to connect them to the right opportunity. And then we partner with various stakeholders, and it's also around understanding what are stakeholders doing around bringing SMEs, and also obviously I'm always going to add our young leaders. How are they actually bringing on new talent in their sector? And for those that don't have ideas, we explore ways to actually build and develop appropriate ways of bringing young people or SMEs into their platform and their work. And it has been really exciting to see some of our partners really being open-minded about how can we bring young people into the sector and how can we work with SMEs. And we've been able to tailor-make such exposure to the sector so that we're able to connect our young leaders and our SMEs to the right opportunities. The second thought was about what are the work that we're doing as AL for Agribusiness that are developing opportunities that SMEs can actually have access to. It has been very exciting to invite a variety of stakeholders and SMEs, especially from the Nourishing Africa network. And what we do is we have a series of speaker series where we invite experts who work in the sector to come and speak about their work and their careers and how they're building careers. We also provide masterclasses that focus on very specific areas of the agricultural value chain to kind of share from real life experience. And then we have now also launched the Think Tank webinar, which is a really exciting platform that enables and invites agripreneurs to come and share around how they're building their businesses, what issues are they seeing. And as a network, we can all kind of brainstorm and think around how do we solve these issues that we're all dealing with as SMEs. And then the other program that we've just developed, which really excites me, it enables me to connect our young leaders to the SMEs in the sector. We've realized that a lot of our SMEs don't necessarily have agri-focused skills, right? A lot of them are driven by passion about, being in the food sector. And so we've then identified our young leaders who are studying in the agri sector can actually provide specific skills to our SMEs. And so we've built the Agribusiness internship program, which is really exciting right now because we're inviting the SMEs to also come and actually share around their struggles of how it is they are trying to hire and bring in talent in the sector. And so that's some of the work that we're doing to develop. We've put together a training session that enables them to understand how are we going to work with our interns who are all over the world because of the pandemic. It means a lot of them aren't actually able to actually come to the businesses. So for us, we've been very excited about finding all these very interesting ways to engage SMEs in the sector, and it has been great to partner with Nourishing Africa to allow this to happen. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you very much. I'd like to move to our next speaker. And again, if you have questions right after all four speakers speak, we'll have a Q&A. And so then you can ask specific questions to Nono and others. Mabantu, Radu.
Hi, Michael, and good day to everyone. So my name is Mabatu Portia Murudi, and I'm the co-founder of the Village Market Africa. I'm actually just going to give a brief introduction to what we do. So the Village Market Africa was founded in 2012, and this was after having grown up on a farm. We had bees that would settle in the ceiling in one of these homes at the farms, produce so much honey that the ceiling would actually cave in. So year in, year out, we went through the same process. Eventually in 2012, my grandfather at the time was 86, then suggested that, no, let's go for a course in beekeeping and see how we can sort of make a living off of this. And that's how we learned that bee populations were declining, that's one. And rural poverty was actually on the rise, and there was a whole lot of honey on the market that's actually not good. And from that, we established our business. And from that, what I found is that working in the rural landscape, how we going to be connecting sort of your producers to, how we're going to connect our growers to markets has been a challenge, in that I find that our systems, we work in silos. So you've got organizations that are tackling training, you've got government that's got extension officers that are doing something else, you've got somebody that's doing financing. But what I've found is that in deep remote villages, whereby access to information is not available, readily available, and access to actually expert subjects matter people, they're not readily available in these communities. And what we ended up doing is that, how do we centralize these systems? So the Village Market Africa goes out into deep remote villages. We train communities in sustainable beekeeping and nature conservation, and provide them with implements with the intention of buying back all this produce from them and sending it to market. And by centralizing these systems, we have found that they're able to produce so much more. Just having this access to information, just having experts that can advise them on how to work in harmony with nature as opposed to exploiting it. We then found that we have found communities that are willing to do the work. It's just not having the opportunities afforded to them to do so. And it's on that premises that we have established our brand that says, we will buy whatever that these communities are producing, buy it back from the communities, ensure that it's good quality, they're following food handling, food safety requirements, and send it out to markets. Not only that, but also organize them in structures that it's easy to work with, as opposed to just being individuals working in their own little corners. And indeed, I must say, we have seen growth over the last 9 years with the communities that we've been working with, from just them considering themselves as just small scale farmers to actually growing into sort of sustainable community initiatives that are producing food for big retail markets. And in a nutshell, that's us.
No, excellent. Thank you, Mabatu. I think you and your company and colleagues are providing a critical role, 2 critical roles. One is aggregation. The other is provision of information. Actually, after the third, it's access to market. And those are things that in rural communities, small farmers grapple with around the continent. So thank you for sharing that. I'd like to ask Thavan Naidu to share with us a bit about the Private Financing Advisory Network. He's the regional representative here in Southern Africa. Thavan, over to you.
Thanks, Michael. Could I just do a quick presentation and share my screen?
Yes. Colleagues, would you let him share screen?
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just going to run you through a very quick presentation of how PFAN operates. And essentially what we are is a finance facilitation accelerator. And you know, for most projects in looking for money, it's always very difficult to find the money. And yet for the people who have money, they have difficulty finding the project. So we try and bridge that gap in terms of linking projects to finance. And we provide the service free of charge to entrepreneurs. We obviously pay the professionals who provide this service to them. And we are supported by UNIDO and REAP to do this, and a whole network of investment professionals and network partners. And we found that this is a very low cost business model and seems to be working really well. You can see some of the people who fund us on this list. And it's a very simple process. We have an open-ended call for projects. People can submit projects at any time that they want. And we in the background then do evaluation and selection of these projects. And for the ones that we think that we can work with, we provide this professional business coaching with the intention of trying to get them to financial close. We generally don't provide finance to projects, we provide services, but we have a small little fund that we can use as a tipping point facility for projects that could work, but there is still something that's outstanding. And of course, we do the investor introductions. So we've grown to a fairly large global network since then. In Africa, we are represented in West, East, and Southern Africa, and I manage the Southern African network, which basically covers all of the SADC countries. So we've now raised in excess of $2 billion. We celebrated that milestone last week, which is over 150 projects, and we have a hit rate of about 20%. So 1 in 5 projects will get to financing. So we've been primarily working in the renewable energy sector, but we've now mainstreamed adaptation into the work we do. So it's a very wide range of sectors that we can work with, and as you can see, agriculture and agribusiness is in there. There could be issues around urban resilience. There could be issues around water and sanitation that deal with food, and these are all projects that we could work with. And generally, when we look for a project, we ideally like a project to be in the range of $1 million to $50 million. Though of course we do work with micro projects, especially those that have the capacity to scale up. We can work with projects in virtually any level of development, although ideally we're looking for projects that are now looking for their first round of external finance. And as I said, it could be any kind of project, and the territories that we're working in. And really, the service that we provide is allowing projects to access financiers more easily. And you can see what financiers say. If you're a global fund, PFAN is a great source of projects. And really, ideally, what we want to do is to make the task of the investor easier. So it's almost like a kind of rubber stamp when a project comes from PFAN, that it's gone through those kinds of processes. So I want to stop sharing my screen now. Let me just see how to do this quickly. Am I still sharing?
Yes, we're still looking at the slide.
Okay, there we go, stop share. Great. Okay, so the questions that I've been asked to respond to, I hope that gives you a brief background in terms of how we engage with projects. But the questions were with regards to how are we creating awareness for climate smart agriculture and its potential. Now, I think the key point to mention here is that there is 2 very clear pots of finance that are available from the sources that we work with. There's the mitigation finance and there's the adaptation finance. And for reasons in terms of the global architecture of these funds, there is a clear differentiation between these 2. And I think one of the really important points to bear in mind when you're dealing with food and agriculture is that there is a way to articulate the adaptation credentials of a project. And we're not seeing that come across very well. And that's a very important aspect for project developers to bear in mind when they're dealing with these kinds of projects. I think the second project is what sort of lessons do we have to share? That's one very important lesson. The other important lesson to bear in mind is that, for a financier, giving out $1 million requires as much work as it does to give out $50 million. And a lot of the projects that we see in these sectors are very small projects. So there has to be some kind of mechanism to agglomerate these projects. And we're looking at how to do that. At the moment, we've got an initiative where we're trying to create a fund. We don't normally give out finance, but we see that projects in these adaptation sectors are firstly small and have a high level of perceived risk. So we're looking to create a fund to get around that. Michael, I hope that that's a good enough background. I'm not sure if there's anything else you'd like me to add.
No, thanks very much, Davin. I think that during the Q&A, if colleagues who are with us have further questions about PFAN, they can pose them. Happy that you've joined, and I think it's been very helpful. I'd like to ask Miles Kubeka, whose Wakanda Food Accelerator is co-convening this, to join us and give his presentation.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Miles Kubeka. I run a food accelerator called Wakanda. We are based in Johannesburg, Cape Town, and soon to spread out to other parts of the country. I essentially deal with entrepreneurs from.
Miles, is your video working, or you have it off purpose? We just don't want you to be in the dark.
I tried to switch it on. It wouldn't let me. It said I don't have permission to switch it on.
Is it possible, colleagues, if we can switch on?
Can you see me now?
Yes, we can.
Great. I can't see myself, but hope everything's cool. Oh, there. As I was saying, thank you for the opportunity. So we run a food accelerator called Wakanda. We're based in Johannesburg. And what we do is we find amazing food entrepreneurs across the food ecosystem. So from seed level, in other words, guys who are in the agro-processing space, all the way to food tech, guys who are doing last mile delivery technologies, or guys who are doing building platforms for the farming or agro-processing ecosystem. And everything in between. We run like 4 programs that specifically deal with what we call the farmpreneurs. And then we've got the Kasipreneurs, so that's businesses based in a township. One of our accelerators is in Alexander Townships. And as you know right now, it's a bit rough out here in Johannesburg. But thank God our center seems to be safe at the moment. So that's our Kasipreneur. And then we've got our Foodpreneur program, which is across the value chain of the food ecosystem. So that includes the consumer packaged goods all the way to alternative protein. We've got amazing entrepreneurs doing some amazing things in that space, especially superfoods. And as you know, with COVID, the rest of the world is clamoring for local indigenous African products that have amazing healing properties. So that's essentially what we do. We find those businesses and then we bulletproof them so that they are sustainable businesses. What we tend to find when we deal with entrepreneurs like we do is that you can spot them a mile away, and they often have 3 core aspects to them. They have passion. You can see passion a mile away. It's often written on the t-shirt they're wearing as their brand or on their product. Then the second thing you see very, very vividly is purpose, why they are doing what they are doing. And that is always the soul of their business, the purpose. That's what keeps them going even when times are tough. What we try to infuse into that system is profit. Which is what I'm being asked to speak about, is why is it that small businesses are struggling to raise capital to a larger, less extent? And is it because they're too fragmented? And the answer is not simple. I think because we touch across all the food verticals, we'll find in farming, for example, or agro-processing, it's very hard for smallholder farmers to make a dent because as you can understand, farming is a large-scale operation in today's time. It's we've got what we call industrial farmers, and the reason why they're industrial is because they've attained knowledge over the last 100 years, and now they're using that knowledge to increase the scale at which they can produce. And retailers typically don't want to buy from a number of smallholder farmers because it's a little bit more complicated. Whereas when you buy from one major farmer, it's easier for them. But more so, it's also most big retailers have their dedicated farmers. So the answer to that specific question for farmers or smallholder farmers, it's very, very difficult. So they have to, in my opinion, find a way to aggregate themselves. And that's why cooperatives were successful. Even the big agri-processors now all started at some point as cooperatives. But unfortunately, how life works is by the time Black African farmers are getting up to speed, the world is moved and it's global, and everybody's already at large industrial scale farming. So, which creates an undue and unfair playing field. So we look at technologies to try and help that, but I think it's one of those things that unless you get the scale, it's going to continue to be a little bit difficult to operate at that position of supplying big retail. But we also believe that in itself is an opportunity. I think smallholder farmers shouldn't try to be put on the shelf or be what's so-called formalized. I think the bigger opportunity for smallholder farmers is townships. Townships are a huge economy that if you could do it smart and seamlessly, you could perhaps make great strides in those communities. And then on the other side of the equation, on the broader side, on the food processing or the consumer packaged goods, I think that's where the bigger opportunity lies. Well, maybe not bigger, but a similar opportunity lies. I think trying to put everybody on a shelf of a big retail is perhaps a miss, especially in a developing country. I think we need to be figuring out how do we get the last mile deliveries and logistics to local and communities, because as well as putting those farms or those manufacturers close to those communities, because of course it reduces the cost to deliver the product. So I do think it is a big challenge for SMEs to raise capital. But what are we finding with our entrepreneurs is that most entrepreneurs actually don't need capital. They're not coming in there looking for money. They're often looking for market access, and I think we've all heard this. But why does that matter? I think for me, it matters because once they do gain access to that market access, the biggest challenge then is that's when they do need some money. And it's often not a lot of money. It's seed capital that they often need. And I think a previous speaker, Tavin, spoke about it, is just the critical, 300,000 rands, 500K, $1 million rands type of seed capital to fulfill the market opportunity that they have now amassed. And that's where we think there's a big opportunity, and that's where most of these startups struggle, is getting that. There's lots of money in the above 5 million to 10 million and above frontier, but there's not enough money in the seed space where someone is essentially taking a level of risk and putting in the money. And what we find, the big organizations, private equity companies, are willing to sign the bigger checks from 5 million and above, and there's no one to sign the smaller check sizes. So I think, to answer the question, it's not a linear answer. It depends on where you are in the food ecosystem, and the capital availability is based on what you do in that ecosystem. So that's what we do. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks very much for a very insightful presentation. And you raised a lot of questions, and I have some thoughts on them, but I know that those amongst us may also have some thoughts. changed my background just to make it clear to those who are participating that if you're in South Africa, or if you're in Eswatini, or if you're in Lesotho, we actually are the country coordinators for PFAN. So we work very closely with Thavin, and I wanted to make sure that you had the URL, pfan.net, to get more information. I'd like to open up our floor now for questions and answers. I've seen a hand from TechnoSpark 7P for some minutes now. So I'd started there. If you have questions that you want to put into the chat, please feel free to do that, or raise your hand and we can call upon you. If you're able, we'd appreciate it if you would turn on your camera for your question and tell us who you are. But if it's difficult to do so, just introduce yourself and carry on with your question. TechnoSpark 7P, do you have a question? Or is your hand up inadvertently?
Yeah. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. My name is Owacho Samson from Nigeria, West Africa. Actually, I get connected to Nourishing Africa through a friend. And my question is that, although I've directed it to one of the co-founder of Nourishing Africa question and answer section, I still want to share the question again. Like now in Nigeria, we have a lot of agribusiness entrepreneurs. Yeah. And we don't know if we really have the hubs where we can access mentorship, have access to grants and funds so that we can grow up our businesses. Because here, there are some limitations that we have. If
we're losing you a little bit on connectivity.
And efficient products. Thank you.
Iffy, are you with us? Because I'm thinking that you might be best positioned to respond to that gentleman's question.
Thank you for the question. But in respect to the current roadshow, we really want to focus on South Africa and South African problems and solutions and challenges. So I'm going to ask that the person who asked, please send us an email or contact us on a different platform. But today we really want to focus on South Africa and South African agribusinesses. Thank you.
Excellent. Asanda, I want to recognize your question. Thanks, Iffy.
Hi, everyone. Sorry about the background. I'm Asanda from South Africa. I just want to know, is there any hub here in Eastern Cape so that a person can go and connect with you guys?
Can you say that again? There's a little bit of noise behind you. Could you speak up a bit? Asanda, can you repeat your question? I think that I heard her ask how to engage with Nourishing Africa here in South Africa. Do you want to
Happy to
put that information in the chat or tell everyone?
We'll put the information in the chat, but please go to nourishingafrica.com and sign up. It's a very straightforward process. We engage virtually for the most part. A lot of our trainings and our resources are available on the hub as well. And then if you sign up to our newsletter, you'd be aware of all the various upcoming events and workshops that we'd be hosting in South Africa. So please just go to the website and my colleague will put that in the chat. Thank you.
Excellent. I want to ask a question of Miles or debate a point that he made about the path to, I'll call it economic success for smaller producers. And in the South African context, we often talk about emerging farmers, which are predominantly farmers of color, Black farmers, and the commercial farmers tend to be in large part white South African farmers who has, as he mentioned, followed a path where 25 years ago they were cooperatives. And in the new dispensation, the government, which had supported them, well, the government changed. So the government pulled back some of the continued support, and those co-ops morphed into corporations and listed. They had the benefit at that time of already having global markets. But by being on the stock exchange, once they became corporations and listed, they also got the benefit of being able to raise capital globally. And so when the world thought that they wanted to help the new South Africa and put money into the country, which they did in part, these companies benefited and they became vertically integrated. They hired the extension workers that used to work for the old government to now work for the company. So it's kind of like a privatization of what in the past had been either public-private or significantly public. The point that I wanted to raise was just that I don't think it's too late for smaller South African farmers, particularly at the productive level, to aggregate and use cooperatives and corporations to increase their economies of scale. Because again, the Black South African consumer is the predominant consumer in the country. And you know, one can have another conversation about whether it's important to create a set of shopping centers to rival the Pick and Pays, et cetera, if you can't get into them through their supply development programs. But the aggregation aspect and is critical to me. And I say that because we, as ABG, spent a number of years working with one of the largest platforms for particularly smallholders. And what came out of that to me is that the continent by 2030, this is the president of the African Development Bank, forecast will be, the food market will be $1 trillion market. So we will continue to have larger players around the world looking to do business in the continent from farm to fork. And to stay small is very difficult. And if you look at even what's happened in the township markets over the last 20 years, it used to be you have mom and pop shops in the township. And then people started doing studies of the amount of money that's in the township. And all of a sudden now you have big shopping malls popping up with the same retailers who are in the suburbs. And so they're coming for that market, so to speak. And so the only way to me to compete is to become bigger. So that's a premise, and we can debate that. And to me, then the challenge would be, how do you do that? Where's the capital for that? Equally importantly, where's the market? I do agree with you that demand-driven, meaning you have a market in hand, growth and development is key. So that's something that Miles, if you have some thoughts on, would love to hear. Mobatu is already aggregating. So Mobatu, I'd love to get your thinking about what Miles mentioned and how you're able to help drive funding to those you're working with, because you mentioned that you do help them with their quality, improve their quality. And typically that requires some resources. So I see a 27768 hand. I would like to have Mobatu respond. I'll ask that question and then Miles respond, and then we'll come to Nono and Thavan as well.
Hi, Michael. Can I go ahead?
Yes.
Awesome. So definitely, and I found the one way of going about it, it's collaborations. We found our work has been made easy if we collaborate between international donors, we collaborate with institutions for research purposes, we collaborate with our universities, so your TV colleges, those people, if you bring them together, we're able to bring about resources that these deep remote villages actually need without having to myself as a business, as a social entrepreneur, to dig deep into our own pockets to actually assist the communities. And it's also about how you model your organization, because we're using a hybrid model whereby we are for profit and we are for doing good. So as a result, we're able to sort of drive funding into the organization in order to be able to do this work that we continuously feeding into these communities. And continuous training and mentoring is something that we have been big on, to say, how can governments help collaborate with us in order to do this work? We've previously tried to do it through the help of extension officers. You know, somebody mentioned passion. I think there was one question that came up around policies. And what I found is that government policies are great on paper, but when it comes to implementation, there's usually a challenge. And us as social entrepreneurs, as public sectors, private sector, if we all come together, I think we're able to offer all these services within the specific areas that we're in. And as a result, we're actually able to grow these communities.
No, excellent. I see a hand up from Gift Mafuleka, and don't go away, Miles, because I do want to get your thoughts on that. But Gift, please ask your question.
Thank you, Michael. Greetings to everyone. Well, I wanted to most from add on the, I hope everyone can hear me.
Can we see you as well, Gift? Or are you hiding from us this morning? Afternoon now.
You cannot start your video because the host has stopped it. So
okay.
I'm trying to, yeah. So I wanted to come in what you have alluded to briefly in terms of the landscape of South African agriculture, from the point of entry as well as the point at tertiary level. I will divide this into two: a grain sector as well as a perishable or highly perishable product sector, which is fruits and vegetables. In the grain sector, what we get in South Africa is, as you've rightfully mentioned, is well established, very strong corporations and an industry that is huge, and it has developed to a point that for a new entrant to enter into that market, either as a primary producer or as a processor, I'm just talking about a grain sector, it becomes difficult to enter and make an impact and sustain your business. So that is to support the point of aggregation. But if you look at a primary sector, I mean a primary level in the grain sector in South Africa, if you produce on less than 100 hectares, it is difficult to make ends meet. And what do you need? What is the biggest resource you need to carry out such a production? It is mainly land. And without land ownership, you will barely struggle to raise capital to acquire other resources that you may need to partake in such production. What also makes it difficult is that we are a developing country, and our agricultural sector is developed, it's highly developed, and it's competing with well-developed countries in the world. And just focusing on the grain sector, if you look at our soybean industry, our maize industry competes with Brazil, with USA. We supply big consumers like China. So for an entrant into that market, which is formalized, you've got no choice. You have to sell your products at a set amount, which is an open market. You've got no control over your prices on your produce. That is for primary producers. And if you're a maize meal producer and agro processor, already prices are set. It's same as prices of bread. So it becomes difficult. What makes it difficult for processors or people who supply retailers in the grain value chain is same as suppliers from the perishable products, which is your cost structures. As an entrepreneur, you are unable to control your cost. Your biggest costs of your operations are controlled outside, because all buyers comes with requirements. And if you look at those requirements, it costs money to be able to meet those requirements. Logistics, the way you have to package your product and deliver your product, it is prescribed. And as a new entry into the market, it becomes complicated. But also compliance. If you look at compliance from the point of food safety, you are unable to be registered as a vendor to supply a particular product if you do not have a facility that complies with a certain standard of food safety, which in its format, for a small player, it becomes unsustainable to spend that amount of money which you do not have and not being guaranteed a market, because the market is based on orders, on purchase orders, and that makes it difficult. It's also the same as in the perishable product value chain, where the formal market is your retailers, and that's where you would probably be certain that you will get paid, and you will get paid for all of your consignment that you've delivered. There's the same barriers. And if you look at what our government is doing to assist new entrants into those value chains, there is none in terms of putting legislation that would force players in the value chain to create quotas for new entrants into such. If I can make an example, if you were to grow a product,
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I'm pulling on your shirt for a moment, because you're going to have a one-on-one very shortly. And I'm sure a number of these things are going to be the exact types of things that everyone wants to hear about your journey. But I definitely appreciate your echoing the initial point. But we have a few minutes left on this panel. And I want to try and get a question from Dennis, but I'd like you to pick up on where you're leaving off as you have your one-on-one shortly. Is that okay? Are you still with me? Dennis, you have your hand up. And everyone, we will have give us an intervention about how he built his agribusiness in 20 minutes or so. Dennis?
My audio is muted. You can hear me?
Yes, we can, and we can see you.
Okay, so thank you very much. First of all, it is my first time to join this platform, and I'm interested to get more about this platform. But I would like to know to what extent is Nourish Africa and this platform able to influence policymakers in line of one, internet challenges on African continent. Two, is also linked with the electricity, because if the SMEs we have to flourish and go into this kind of investments, these key challenges, they are very structural for African continent. I don't know to what extent do we have this influence towards this? Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. I'm going to ask when next they come and share with us, perhaps Ife or Ramat to respond. Where are you calling in from? Which country? You're on mute. Not sure where you are. Yep.
Uganda, calling from Uganda.
Okay. Okay. So they will know that we have a few minutes left on this panel with this group. But I'll ask either in the chat or when they come back for our colleagues to respond to your question.
Thank you so much.
Miles, Nono, or Savin. And actually in that order. And then Mabatu, I'd like to get your last thoughts on the subject connecting and equipping agri-food SMEs in Africa. And maybe I would ask you to narrow it to South Africa. And I raised some points, as did Gift, about the South African market itself. And if you have any comments about how SMEs might negotiate in this market to grow, I think that would be a great way to end our session. So Miles, over to you.
Thank you. I think the challenge we face, particularly in South Africa, is that I personally have heard this narrative for the last decade or so. Smallholder farmers, let's make them mainstream, let's get them to supply to retail and so forth. I personally haven't seen it play out, but I would relegate to Nono, who's a specialist in agro processing, if they are seeing it play out. And with that being said, Nono is a more industrial farmer as the others. But she would have visibility as to the smallholder farmers if they're seeing progress on that front. But in my limited experience, smallholder farmers have smallholder issues, just as even when you aggregate them, there's logistics issues, there's no cold chain, there's all these standards that, like global gap or even local gap standards, that make the retailers put upon them, which then leaves them to only be able to distribute to markets as opposed to mainstream retail. And I just think there's some seriously big, maybe surmountable challenges they have. But as an entrepreneur, I always look at a path of least resistance. If somebody doesn't want you, then I think spend more of your energy where somebody does want you. And it seems to me the structured retail channels or value chain doesn't accommodate small-sized businesses very well. And that's not just farming, and that goes across to any consumer packaged good that is from a small-scale manufacturer, because it has to pass all the stuff that Gift spoke about, all the required mandatory health and safety. And if you're doing it at a small scale, those things are a huge cost, to put a warehouse, factory, and then maintain the cold chain. These are like seriously just, but I do agree that if you could aggregate most of those things, you would be halfway there. But I can certainly speak to, some of our entrepreneurs. Some of them are on this call. I mean, they can speak for themselves in terms of, their journey, and I've been part of that journey, and it's very hard as a small startup business to make it mainstream. And of course, that's the one half of the journey. The other half is to stay on the shelf.
I'm going to jump in because we're running out of time. I think
Cool, no
you've made a
problem.
key point. I just want to hear Nono's thoughts on this. As you mentioned, she's been in this space for a number of years and playing at a certain level. What's your take on this subject, Nono? It's over to you.
Sure, thanks. Thanks, Michael. Miles mentions very important points. So the difficulty of participation at the right level for SMMEs in the sector so that they can actually have profitable business, sustainable business, and actually succeed. So in general, that's what it is. And what's interesting about South Africa is because the system already exists, I mean, we already have a very good network of accessing markets, a good network of infrastructure. So there is, in terms of roads and, electricity, as well as, access to internet, all the likes. So the market is set to actually enable us to succeed as, SMEs getting into the sector. The problem, which I mentioned earlier on, is accessing. So access is actually what the difficulty is. And in the way I have, experienced it and understand it is that we need to build better relationships in the sector along with those that already are participating in the sector so that we can all kind of play along. We can't start brand new, we can't literally start a whole new industry on our own. It's not going to work. So for me, I think in the work that we're doing, even as I sit on the board of the Agricultural Development Agency, the most important is actually matching those that need the right support to where the support actually exists. And that's really around understanding who is helping. As I said, Miles and them already got an incubator program, so to speak, but do people know about it? And how do we, facilitate that those that are in the townships would know that there's something that exists for them? The difficulty of things not being organized well enough is that I get a call from someone in Eastern Cape, as we've just heard, who needs help down there. If I am in Johannesburg, it's very difficult for me to be able to provide the right infrastructure for them. So I think for me, it's the two main things is information sharing so that people will know where to go and how to go about it. And then the second one is also making sure that these hubs and these vehicles that are already working are well, accessible to the people around them that can actually access that support. So, and that's how I really think it's important. So some of the work we're doing as well is organizing farmers. Don't be on your own. Join an organization. Be part of an established, some sort of organization, which will then be able to be the conduit for you to access all of these support. So that's my take, Michael.
No, very, very well said. I'm going to ask Davin, because one of the questions that came in was, what happens to the other 80% of the projects that come through? And then I'd also like to ask you your thoughts on how do you have a more inclusive agricultural and agribusiness sector in South Africa?
So I think two things that are key here, scale and risk. In terms of scale, it's really a chicken and egg situation because you're not going to get to the scale until you have the markets and until you have the finance. And it somehow can't work. I mean, they are low-hanging fruit. Certainly, supply chains are an interesting low-hanging fruit. There's a lot of money that big corporates have. And there's lots of funds available to support smaller projects. I mean, if you look, for example, at rabbit farming is a great sector with huge potential and a huge export potential as well. But, and that's a nice agglomeration, aggregation point, where if you can bring farmers together, you need to create an abattoir, you need to create the export markets exist. You just need to be able to fulfill the orders. But without that aggregation point, it's difficult for a small farmer to get in. It's very difficult for a small farmer to go the full route and to set up an abattoir. And that's the other problem that we're seeing a lot, is that actually to support small farmers, you need a different kind of ecosystem to the one that exists for large commercial scale farmers. So you really, we've had this example in Mozambique where you've got a small company looking at setting up a distribution network for agricultural inputs. And they've had to start a property development company so that they can have warehousing in their different locations. They've had to start a logistics company so that they can do their distribution. They're into day-old chickens. Now they've had to start a feed company in order to supply the feed for them. So, you really have to build an entire ecosystem, and it is step by step, but there are also opportunities where you can leapfrog. The example of rabbit farming is interesting, where, unfortunately it's been a failure, but there are examples of how you can do it. So, I think that you have to build a different kind of ecosystem. And just to respond to that question on the other 80% of the pecan projects, a lot of them do continue, and we do keep track of them. So even if we are not successful in terms of raising the money while we're holding their hands, we often find that subsequent to our interaction, we've given these companies the skills for them to go on and develop and access that finance on their own. Thank you, Martin.
No, thank you very much. Ubuntu, you're going to have our last word. We're just a bit over. Please share with us your last word on the subject or the conversation we've been having. Ubuntu, are you with us? I think we may have lost our last speaker, but we will, at this juncture, invite our keynote speaker. We want to thank all of the panelists and thank those who raised their hands. If there was a hand that was not raised, we'll ask that you please put in the chat your questions. I know there's some chats, some questions for contact details, etc., so that we can make sure we respond to your questions. I'd like to ask Mr. Kuta, if you have joined us. I know that earlier this morning you had a conflict, and so we rearranged our schedule a bit to accommodate yours joining us now. So we're very pleased to have Mr. Letha Kuta as our keynote speaker, who heads the enterprise and supplier development. He's the director of that at Tiger Brands. And Tiger Brands is one of South Africa, and in fact, Africa's leading food companies. So we're very pleased to have him join us for the Nourishing Africa Roadshow here in South Africa. We will need to allow him to share his video.
No, I'm not going to do a video. I'm just really going to be sort of giving a sense of what we do at Tiger. Firstly, okay, for the invite, and also I listened to the previous engagement the speakers. Pretty much some of the things that they were talking about really talks to the heart of some of the stuff that I really want to cover. From what I got, the brief was that I've got about 10 minutes to really just contextualize from a Tiger Brands what we do and how we do it. And I'm hoping I'll be able to do that. Then I'll take questions later on. So Tiger Brands is the biggest food manufacturer in not just in South Africa, but in Africa. We really own a whole host of brands that are household brands. In South Africa alone, 26% of any basket that someone buys has our product. That's the size of, of how big we are in terms of, as a consumer product. And because we're a food manufacturer, obviously our success is embedded in agriculture. And obviously my role there is to make sure that I support Black farmers to integrate into supply chain. And then the second part is also start to work with distributors to make sure they take our products to market. But for the purposes of this discussion, I'm really going to be focusing on the supply side, which is the farmer development program. So just context so that people will get a sense of why we did the program that we did. Before I worked for Tiger Brands, I was heading up enterprise and supply development for Woolworths. And it was there that I started to see that when they were managing portfolios of products in the agriculture space, that they were actually having what they call captain of industries. What that means in simple terms is if you buy potatoes, you'll have 3 or 4 suppliers that are supplying potatoes. But when you lift the veil of those suppliers, you'll find one supplier has a host of about 40 to 50 other suppliers under them as they are outgrowers. The only interesting part was that these were all white suppliers, from the main aggregation to the companies, the farmers that were outgrowers. And they were so well set, and also from a skill perspective, that they were able to source from each other, give each other contract. They will raise financing. The aggregator had the agro processing to take the product, clean it up, package it, and also send it to Woolworths. So when I came to Tiger Brands, because when I was at Woolworths, I was so preoccupied with smallholder farmers, trying to get as many farmers into the supply chain. And when I got the opportunity to work for Tiger Brands, I realized that in my previous portfolio, I actually made a mistake. I did it the opposite, because you can support hundreds and thousands of smallholder farmers. You are never going to conquer supply chains. All you're doing what is called economic participation. People are just a participation, but you are not transforming, because their volumes as individuals are neither here or there when it comes to the proportion to which companies are buying. So when I started in 2018, I was asked to come and set up their enterprise and supply development from scratch. Having learned what I've learned and having seen my mistakes, one of the things that I proposed in my strategy was I wanted to do an aggregator program. And the reason why I wanted to amplify it is that I wanted to make sure that it's signed off at an executive level. Because what that model was doing, it was challenging the existing structures that exist. And I'll show you one example where we've done that, and it has almost shaken the industry, right, because of what we've managed to do with the aggregator program. And so we said the aggregator program would be the first layer of our support. And we want them to be Black owned. In fact, we want them to be 100% Black owned, because we don't want any equity structures, because equity structures in agriculture in South Africa have been very disastrous. And we know that there's been a lot, of our Black brothers and sisters who've been, taken for a ride with that. So we don't want any structures when it comes to equity, 100% Black owned. That's what we work with. Even though the B codes allow for 51, we said we are not interested in that, so that we avoid issues of, fronting and, Black people being used to access opportunities. So when we did that, we also realized we needed to also do a smallholder farmer program just as a second layer under the aggregator. But what we were going to do is we were not going to go and hire organizations that do outgrower support, because the problem with that model is they support farmers. If they fail, they've got nothing to lose. right? You could pay 5 million rand, they support 200 farmers, the farmers supply half of what you want. The companies that were supporting the farmers, they just walk away. And it's so prevalent in the sector. So what we've done, we said the aggregator will be the agent of change. It will be where the support for the farmers will happen. Why is that? So that your destiny as an aggregator is dependent on the performance of the farmers in your network. And we also managed to make sure that this works well. We also had to look at the financial, structures that we needed to do from financial inclusion. So one of the key things that we did, we created a wholesale finance instrument, and we said, aggregator, here is a wholesale, we'll give it to you. You can on-lend it to the farmers, and you cannot charge them more than X amount of interest. And by the way, the interest is prime-less, right? That's what the smallholder farmer would sort of pay. That's one. Two, we will make sure that we give you the money to support the farmers, because they are your farmers. They are part of your networks. And also how these farmers are set, they are set in clusters because it's cheaper to work with farmers in a cluster model where you sort of use a municipality demarcation to cluster them, right? And because it's easy to aggregate them and then take it to a silo. If you're doing grains, if you're doing small whites and groundnuts, it's easy to aggregate and take it to a processing facility to do the cleaning and the grading and the sorting. So we've managed to, and also we make sure that aggregators don't coexist in one area, so that you don't find farmers jumping from one aggregator to the next, all right? So you'll find one aggregator is in Western Cape, one is in Northwest, another is in KZN, but we always avoid, if they're in the same province, they might not necessarily be in the same district, so that we make sure that we avoid that. Also, we normalize pricing so that we don't get one aggregator undercutting the market, paying farmers X and another one. Make sure that the pricing parity is achieved across the network. And the support that then gets provided is the capacity building, the extension service, but it's done at an aggregator level. Why is that important? Is then it forces us to make sure that the aggregator that comes to us has pretty much core skills. There's about 4 or 5 skills that we want. One, the ability, obviously you gotta have your agrarian skills, agronomy skills, food scientist if you can. You must understand supply chain skills, right? Because you're going to move supply chain and logistics, going to move things. Also, you're going to need fundraising, because to put application for a wholesale finance, you must be able to put financials together, financial modeling, and make sure that you are able to put financial proposal that will be approvable. So you need to have financial acumen to do that, right? And also supply chain experience to negotiate with procurement, because there are negotiations that's going to take place. So what we then did was we started to see that the aggregators needed to be highly professional people, right? In South Africa, they confuse that model with co-ops. They think it's a group of farmers that are coming together. It's the opposite. There's no way that farmers that are huffing and puffing on how to farm will be able to aggregate and have the core skills to run the things that I've mentioned. So we did the opposite, right? But what we also said was that these aggregators, they can be national aggregators. They also need to set up a regional, so that they allow farmers to be part of an aggregated structure at a level of, of a cluster, right? And then what we did, we started buying through the main aggregator. And over time, we've managed now to onboard the regional aggregators to supply us directly. And over the past 2 years of running this, we've managed to shift 250 million spend. We've managed also to fund in excess of 50 million rand of our own fund, because we've got a fund, 100 million fund. We are going to be announcing a 350 million fund with a bank that actually saw this, that we were doing. They started funding our aggregators outside of us. We engaged with them, and now we're going to have a collaborated fund that is going to be, and they're going to be funding at an aggregator level again, because that insulates the farmers at a lower level. And the aggregator's job is to make sure you help the farmers with the skills, the expertise, the professionalization in terms of the back office, running their books. Because over time, we want those farmers to start creating, a reputation, build an experience, build a track record, and then they should be able to then go and apply for funding themselves, right? And also part of what we've also allowed is that one farmer can supply to more than one aggregator in our program. Why? Because again, when I was at Woolworths, I saw a farmer in Parabora would be supplying Dew Crisp this side, Into Foods this side, Into Food Fresh to Go this side. And they were all, someone could be running a 200 million business in Parabora, never set a foot in any of the retails, but supplying all the aggregators that are plugged into those. So we had to make sure that we get our farmers to understand the model, right? And also what we've done, we've allowed our aggregators can supply other food manufacturers. There's no restraint of trade because we want to make sure that they can access more markets, right? And in so doing, the bigger they can grow and diversify, the better it is for the farmers at a lower level. Then one of the things that we started to realize was that we needed to start to segment the farmers just below the aggregator. So we came up with a 3-tier model that works for us. Model 1 is mega farmers, because now part of our plans that we want to do with the aggregators to say you need to get mega aggregators as part of your portfolio, right? These are the guys, if they are doing, grains, they could be planting 500 hectares, one farm, or they're doing 1,000 or 2,000, because we also need black farmers in that space. There is no way they can make a dent into a supply chain through smallholder farmers. It's sheer impossible. We buy in excess of 1 million tons. I mean, how many farmers do you need to do that, right? You cannot be doing with the smallholder farmers, right? Also, what we've done, we also allow them, we work in the model of also making sure they buy from smallholder farmers, which is the second layer after the mega farmers. And the third one is we're setting up now, we're busy working with a college to set up what is called a micro farm, where we're going to give colleges contracts so that when they train kids, right, they train them on live projects with us. And when those kids graduate, they are able to set up their own smallholder, and they will be aggregated by the college. We're doing a pilot, which is starting in the next 3 months with one college to do that. If it works well, we want to make sure that we can work with all the colleges. Obviously, we need to talk to the government to make sure that they're allowed to do that, to have a commercial side, So that is our skill development. We also, part of our aggregators, they must take learners. So we're going to be taking we're going to be issuing 91 learnerships paid by Tiger for agriculture students, but they will be deployed across our network of our farmers, whether at a aggregator level or at a smallholder level, so that they can provide that support and get experience. And then at the end of a year, they have a choice. It's either they work there or they can set up their own small holding and they can be aggregated. And because we've done that, an example of what we've done, we took small white beans, which we use for cool beans, which is one of our main products. And we looked at the portfolio. We ring-fenced 5% to one female aggregator, right? And it was their first year they got a contract to supply us. Part of their mandate is also get black female farmers as part of their network of farmers. And they got the contract. Currently they are harvesting. It looks very well. We're comfortable that they'll be able to supply us, the volumes. For the first time, we're not just talking about a black farmer supplying us, 5% of our beans, but we're talking about a female farmer supplying us 5%. At a broader portfolio, we're sitting at about 12%, right? In terms of black farmers into the small white beans. Our intention is to grow that to 30%. That is our aim for the next 2 to 3 years, right? To get everything into 30%. We're applying that same model on white maize. We're going to do it on tomatoes that we use for our All Gold. We're also going to apply it on sorghum that we use for King Corn, right? And Movite product. We're also going to be looking at groundnuts, which we use for our black cat peanut butter. So at the end, colleagues, I'm trying to say is that issue of aggregation has to be supplier, partnership with the market. We have to make sure that corporates that do the buying enable aggregation to happen. By the way, it's already happening, right? It's already happening. It's just that this way of doing business has never been open to Black people. We've been, personally ourselves, we've been misled to go into smallholder farm. You can do smallholder farmers for 100 years. You're not going to change the structure of the agricultural economy. I think it was said in the previous discussion, because those co-ops, they modernized and corporatized in before 2000, right? Just after 1994. And they started also to consolidate, they started buying each other to create these big listed companies. So if we want to make sure that we drive Black people to get into agriculture, the first thing you need to do, you need to create an aggregation model which insulates the farmer at the bottom, because that's the big thing that it does. The farmer doesn't have to worry about the standards, and the audits of the buying firm, right? Because the aggregator does that, the negotiation of pricing. We know the issues of education of our people is not that high. There's no way I can take some farmers and say they must engage, with our commercial teams, because they don't have the commercial savviness. So you need, that level of insulation. But but just below it, we need to make sure then that we have thriving mega Black farmers, thriving smallholder, but we also have our, our small farmers that are at a micro level, because you need that for livelihood sustainability. And some of the farmers have no ambition to grow big. They just want to feed their families, and that's okay. I think Miles might have said it. It's okay to be small if it suits your life, right? Not everyone has to grow. As long as everyone benefits from a revenue of the sector and makes a living, and those who are ambitious enough to grow can start as a micro farm and actually go right up to be a mega farmer, and that is also okay, right? And we need to create different channels and different levels so that people can find which level they want to be. Some of the smallholder farmers don't want to be mega farmers. We don't have to push them. We just have to create a path that it's there if you so choose to do it, and be able then to provide the right funding support. For an example, we're the only company that does wholesale finance in agriculture. No one does it, right? And now we've just twisted a bank's arm to do the same. And I'm hoping that when we do this, other banks are going to wake up, because we're going to announce this in the next 6 weeks, right? They're going to wake up that is how it's done. In fact, if you look at all the big firms, that's how they do it anywhere, right? So there's a lot of secrecy in the agriculture. There's a lot of insulation of information and models. So companies like Tiger Brands, we know better. We should be able to take that information and say, how do we take our people and augment them to be structured correctly? And also for some people to understand, like I said, with the white farmer who's making 200 million in Parabora, he has no interest of being an aggregator. He just wants to supply to aggregator and make his 200 million. So how do we get also entrepreneurs in agriculture to know that not everyone's going to be an aggregator, not everyone's going to be a mega farmer. You just need to be at a place where you are comfortable and make the money that you need to make. But if you've got ambitions to go up the chain, you are allowed. But when you want to go that path, that there's enough support to be able to do that. So from Tiger colleagues, we are excited. We won 2 awards last year. Before this meeting, we were also shortlisted for another award in terms of driving women in agriculture, because in all our projects, 40% of farmers across the network and the aggregator have to be Black female, right? And we are looking at ways now to incorporate young people through the college structure. And I'm hoping that that will also bring a lot more in terms of, making sure that the skilled, young people in the agriculture space do find an expression and an opportunity to have a path to get into supply chain, because we can't have a situation where people graduate in universities. The question is, what now? We need to make sure that we create that path. In closing, we are also very aware of the African continent free trade. And as Tiger, we're looking at it, not just how to enhance ourselves into the African continent, but also how do we create path for our brothers and sisters in African continents where we do business, that they are able to do business with Tiger. But we're still busy with the planning around be mindful of the different regulations around different countries, how it was about 4 to 6 months to really understand all the regulation, to understand how it works. And then we want to start carving some opportunities where we can be able to open up to other African, brothers and sisters in different, African countries to also be able to be part of our farmer development program. Let me stop there. I'll take questions. Thank you very much, Michael, for the invite again.
No, thank you very much for those, I think, very enlightening words, particularly coming after the mini debate that we had in the previous session. We are, colleagues, running a little bit late, but if there was 1 or 2 questions, because I think this was a very provocative statement, we will take them. What I would ask is if you could put in the chat how people could get more information about the programs that you mentioned. There were a lot of people very excited about trying to plug in. Pamela, would you like to ask a question?
Thanks. Good day, colleagues. My name is Pimelo from South Africa. Thank you, Lita, for a wonderful presentation. Very insightful, and thank you for the innovation that you've brought into the space. My question, actually, they're supposed to be 2, but I'll make them 1. I'll make it into 1 question. It's basically the small farm, the farmers, the small farmers that you are assisting to be sustainable. In terms of, do you have measures in terms of assessing to say that if you are a small farmer in year 1, probably in the 3rd year, you should have reached a particular level, even if you are not a mega farm, so that you are able to see that these people are progressing this a movement from being a small to a bigger. I understand the issue that you've raised, that people should be comfortable with the size, but I also think that it will contradict what we are trying to do as Black farmers in South Africa. Currently, or the misconception is that people, they tend to be comfortable across the spectrum in terms of running business, especially as Black people. We tend to be comfortable to say that this is how far we can go, and that's it. So I think we need to fight that issue. Let's not allow it to be a norm for people to be comfortable being a small farmer. Let them challenge themselves so that they are able to go and be mega farmers, so that other young generation, when they come, they can learn from them that it's possible to be a mega farm. So once we allow people to be comfortable and we leave it at that level, then we are not going to go anywhere. We still have the same thing happening. The other people will come after you, they still have the same impression that a Black man can only go to a small holding and that's it. So I think for me, that's what I wanted to raise with you. I get and I appreciate what you have given us, the presentation and all. Thank you.
Okay. So in answering that, it's very simple. Colleagues, our job is to create a path. People must choose whether they want to walk it or not. There is no way that I can force a farmer who's comfortable being a small-scale commercial farmer to be a mega farmer. I can't. It's impossible. But what we need to do is to be able to sell the idea that if you've got that ambition, it's a correct ambition. These are the benefits. This is what you need to do, and then let people decide. And the more we spread the word, the more we're going to have enough people, joining in. But if you look at the pyramid anyway of economic participation, the higher you go, the fewer the people. It's just the way that, the nature of how economics works, right? That the players become more, the lower you go. But in South Africa, there are blockages for people not to go up. So they are not down because they are comfortable with there's literally a lot of barriers. I mean, drama, of guys getting implements, drama getting, I've had farmers who bought at scale, but were denied getting rebates, right? Others don't get planters, others don't get harvesters. There's a lot of drama there, but our job is to create that path, make sure that the farmer is aware of the opportunity, how they can grow. Whether they grow or not, then it really depends on them. We cannot force them. In terms of how do we make sure that they grow, our job is we grow the top and then we force the top to grow the bottom. So for an example, all my aggregators brief for this year is double whatever you're doing. If you were making 40 million, I want proposal for the next coming season to be 80 million rand. And those volumes need to then cascade below, whether you are actually growing the existing network of farmers that you have, but also we're pushing that, expand that network so that we can get more farmers in, because that's part of procurement inclusion. We can't allow aggregators to grow the same farmers to be big, because they will actually perpetuate the same problem that we actually have. But we sort of, what we're trying to do now is trying to work out what is the percentage model in terms of saying how far can you grow your existing, if we give you new volumes, how much should go to existing guys versus how much should be used for new entrants, right? So that's something that we do, because once we give them those volumes, they also have to show us at the bottom how it affects the farmers below them in terms of the increased number. So if one farmer was planting 20 hectares, I want to see that farmer planting 40 or at least 30. To show upward mobility. But those plans then have to be arranged and agreed at an aggregator with the network. And again, that is where ambition comes in. So you'll find one wants to grow 4 times, one wants to grow 1 time, one says, I'm comfortable. We have to make sure that at the end, the net effect is that the hectareage that gets planted is increasing in terms of the farmer network that an aggregator has. Thanks.
No, thank you, Letha. I think we could all spend the rest of the afternoon chatting with you, because in the South African environment, this is very topical and very key. I saw earlier in the chat questions about our focus on South Africa. Again, this is the Nourishing Africa Roadshow to South Africa. So we're all things South Africa, but as has been mentioned, there is and there will be in the breakaways conversation about expansion into other parts of Africa, relationships between South African businesses and other businesses on the continent through the African Continental Free Trade Area. But thank you very much for a very insightful keynote. Again, we're glad that you were able to join us after your morning's activities. We're going to shift now, colleagues, to a deeper dive one-on-one with a young man who has gone through this path of growing, working with corporates, now playing in the boardrooms of the leadership ecosystem in South Africa in his field. And we wanted him to share with all of you that experience because, again, he studied, he had the passion, and he's been able to grow. And so I'd like to welcome again Gift Mafuleka to join us, and my colleague Mignon Karagu will manage the interview and engagement with him. Mignon, over to you and to Gift.
Thank you, Michael. Good afternoon, colleagues and all the participants to this roadshow. Without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Mr. Gift Mafuleka. But I would like to remind you as well that this is an open interactive session, and Mr. Mafuleka will take your questions directly. Please use the raise hand feature and we will unmute you to ask your questions. Alternatively, you may also post your questions directly to me in the chat, and I will read out to our guest. Gift, I would like you to introduce yourself and please take us through your journey and please get us back to the discussions that we were on a few minutes ago. There was so much interesting points that you touched on, and I would like you to please get back to them. And of course, we will welcome our questions as you get your introduction done. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mignon. As it has been mentioned, my name is Gift Mafuleka. I'm not sure if my video is working.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Well, I'll just give a brief back of who is Gift Mafuleka and what do I do now, and what are my aspirations going forward as a business person, mainly, but also as an entrepreneur. I hail from the east coast of South Africa, in KZN. Have since been based in the Gauteng region. That is where my farm operations are based, and that is where most of my business and other activities within the agricultural sector is based. I describe myself as having been a farmer since the age of 8 years. I grew up under the mentorship of my grandfather, my late grandfather, and grandmother, who were both subsistence farmers. Well, they had a number of cattle, over 50 heads of cattle. At the time, he was still considered a subsistence farmer, because when I was growing up selling cattle, that's the environment I grew up under, growing vegetables and so forth. But I got my inspiration to be a commercial farmer, seeing the struggle which my grandfather had to go through when he had to feed his cattle during dry years, irrigate his vegetables and sugar cane, and make sure he delivers a reasonable yield of sugar cane to the nearest meal. So all those struggles made me want to be a commercial farmer next door, which were a corporation in the area. I then started a multinational food company as a crop manager after studying, which only lasted for 4 years. And I pursued my dream of becoming a commercial farmer when an opportunity presented itself in 2009. I got access to land. I also had a good network which I had established while I was working to raise funding. I knocked in many doors. I was able to raise sufficient funding to start at a, I would call it an economically viable level. I planted 100 hectares. I started by planting 100 hectares of dryland grains. It was during wet years, so one could rely on dryland production. I also did 30 hectares of contract farming and irrigation, supplying field vegetables, which included peas, sweet corn, and potatoes. That grew to a point where we be at another level, which never came, which then forced me to restructure my farming business, into deciding now what scale with the resource that I can farm it, or I can operate it and still remain sustainable. In other words, what can we do to keep the jobs that we have, to be able to maintain the equipment and the properties that we have, and repeat that over the years and carry on. And I was able to identify that level, which meant scaling down on some of the operations. We had grown up to 500 hectares of grain production, which we had to scale it down back to 200 hectares, which is what we we were comfortable of doing. That was 4 years after inception, 4 years after I started farming. And there was actually a point where I realized that I had probably started at a much bigger scale than what my capacity in terms of knowledge, in terms of experience, and in terms of physical resources. And it felt more like I'm starting afresh, and I had to redesign my business and start thinking about how do we diversify options, to ensure that for each and every, how do we make sure that brings in income rather than focusing on just farming and maintaining equipment and letting equipment stand for a couple of months before we need to utilize it, which did not work for us. I then started a mechanization operation within my setup, which meant helping other farmers in the vicinity to produce crops, which they mainly grains, and mobilize other resources in terms of hiring equipment from networks that I had also mobilized during my 4 or 5 years being in the industry, and try something new in terms of aggregating in resource mobilization as farmers, as well as making sure that we derive income on most of the things that we as farmers in the local area, we were able to maximize our profits. We still do that, and it is more like a culture now than business, because some of the transactions are not monetary, but they are a change, which is, I believe, it's important, because then you've created relationships that would your generations will be able to reap some benefits from. We further on diversified into perishable products, vegetables. I had always been producing vegetables at a very scale and never had formal markets. We're able to mobilize funding, put facilities together, as a speaker has alluded previously, to say it's a matter of an egg and a chicken. What must come first? Is it infrastructure, or is it the market? The market has these requirements and so forth. But through the networks and through the support from all the most networks that I had been able to mobilize, we're able to set up a vegetable enterprise, which is a 3 enterprise that is running on the farm. It supplies mainly retailers with many frustrations, one of them being very slim margins. But I've realized that, good margins come with learnings, and it will come over time as you are able to learn what eats most of your money, if you've got control of it, and how best can you explore other markets. We have currently realized that on food that people eat in South Africa, cabbage and spinach is very popular with local communities. We supply those to the retailers, but at a very slim margin. But yet we are able to sell the same product to local market, as Miles was saying, at a much higher profit margins, except volumes, moving volumes, it's a bit of a challenge. But that's a call one would have to make. Over the years, I've been able to branch to other businesses that are complementary to farming. But our fundamental business, my fundamental business, my business that's livelihood to my family is primary production with part agro processing on the vegetative side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gift. That's a really interesting journey that you've just taken us through. While I wait for questions to come through, I have another question of my own I would like to ask you. It's mainly with regards to your business model. I know you took us through a few critical points that you had to consider as you were starting your business and as you were growing slowly over the years. But I would like to understand what the critical points we should learn from your business plan. What should we learn as new agripreneurs? What should we look for? You talked about networking access. You talked about how you should restructure once you start and you understand how your enterprise is growing and making revenue. You talked about sustainability. Have you considered all of those points in your initial business plan? And how did you get to prepare it? Did you get help? I know you mentioned you had a mentor who was your previous employer, but can you explain a little bit further and take us through that journey again?
Thank you. Okay, I'll answer that question in two. And the first part is yes.
Connection is quite bad, Gift. We are struggling to hear you. Right.
Something. Miles mentioned something. Okay, can you hear me now? Yeah.
Much better.
Okay. Initially, I think it's passion and the drive and knowing how are you going to be able to achieve your goal, and people element in success, how you handle relationships, how you relate to people, and how you handle yourself, and how are you able to articulate what you want to achieve. That's the first thing. People start believing and start putting there. You are able to articulate your goal and you are clear about how to go about it. Then the second part is I've learned that, to achieve anything, especially in farming or in the business that I'm in, you would have to have philosophy, and unfortunately, philosophy you cannot buy. No one can train you to perhaps you can get training to be philosophical, but it's something that gets and you as you walk the journey, business philosophy, your social conduct yourself. I've learned that you under that pillar of philosophy, people relate to a person rather than to what the business of a person does. Customers relate to a person, suppliers relate to a person, and other stakeholders, community relate to a person, which in farming is a big stakeholder. But also philosophy depends on the location, how you choose to do things will depend mostly on many aspects. Could be the kind of suppliers that you're dealing with, the kinds of customers that you're dealing with, and the kind of climate that you are dealing with. So location plays a very big part, and also history. Where do you come from? Do you have resources resources that you were able to inherit? Did you inherit anything in your life? Did you start up with from a positive platform, or you started from the ground up? So all of that is very important, because then your history, if you know that you've not or you have inherited anything, you've got a responsibility to carry that over to the next generation. In my case, I never inherited anything that helped me to start my farming operations, but my parents, as supportive as they were, they gave me education, which made me accepted in the industry. Because without that education, I was not going to get any employment. I was not going to get a platform for people to recognize me. So just as much as sometimes I feel like to what I'm doing now, but it still played a big part in setting up things for me to be able to pursue my goals. So I think in summary, I think as a person, you must have a philosophy. It is even much more important in the field of farming. I'll make an example. One of the old men that I look up to, his focus has always been to drive down costs in his farming enterprises. He last year was the third highest producer of soya beans per hectare basis. He was able to, on dry land, produce 3.2 tons of soya beans. And if you look at his profit margins, were out of this world. But what is his philosophy? If you speak to him, you can see that this is embedded in him, and you can take it away from him, because he has gone back. But what supports him? It's the location. You would try and steal the way he does things, but the area in which he is, it is out of this world. If I was probably in that area and I have no idea of what the area possesses in terms of natural resources, soils that has nutrients that are natural in the soil, I would come in there and start buying all those nutrients and fill them up into the soil for no reason, but not to money. So it's from that point where I say, know where you are, things over and over to understand those things work for you. The farmer that I'm talking to you said to me, Gift, I will never in my life buy hybrid seeds. And I'm not trying to talk any business out by so saying, but he's making money, and he's been doing that for more than 5 years since he started with that. And I so wish I could get to that level also. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Gift. I'm not sure if we have questions from our participants. Please feel free to ask your questions directly or post them on chat box. while we wait for the questions gift, I took note of some of the interesting points that you've mentioned. It basically means that you have to scan your environment first. When you want to start a business, you have to study your market. You have to understand your market. You have to determine where the money will come from, where revenue will come from. And obviously you have to continue to network. You have to continue to surround yourself with great mentorship, good mentors as you grow. That's true. And in speaking, I could tell your true passion. I mean, I met you years ago and I visited your farm, and I think I have to get back, there to see how big you grew from then. But another question I'd like to ask you while we wait for these questions to come through. I know back then you have told me that you were looking forward to train your community. You wanted to train young farmers, and I wanted to know if you've studied that and what you've seen, and if from that young community you could see that there's hope in your region from young farmers to emerge. As we know, South Africa has its issues in terms of land acquisition, in terms of cost of operations that you said much earlier that are controlled from the inside. And I would like you to also get back to that point, because that's very critical for us to know. And maybe you can also tell us a little bit about what you think should change in the policies. From the public sector standpoint, how do you think we should interact with the government to solve these questions that are still experienced by young Black farmers in South Africa? So yeah, the first question was, have you studied your college, if I should call it that way, and how is it going?
Okay, Minyan, thank you for those questions. Well, I would say the idea was not necessarily to start a college, but it was to open up our facility, open up our operations to people who would want to get inspired, get information, and move forward with whatever they are aspired to be doing. Today, I think our farm gets well over 10 visitors a month, which when time allows, we are able to take, and mostly young people and women, we are able to take those people across what we do. Unfortunately, when people come to the farm, they come with expectations. We are a crop production farm. I don't have a business in livestock, though we may have livestock on the farm. So when people come, they come with different aspirations, and we take them through what we are able to take them through on. But yeah, we don't have formal sitting training sessions. The aim is to inspire and aspire people who are interested in commercial farming. And my advice is always start small, because I have personally suffered the consequences of starting way ahead of what I could handle. So that's one part. And in terms of coming to government and the policies, I participate in various forums in government and in the agricultural sector. I have been a board member of various commodity organizations, including Potato South Africa's, which looks at the interest of potato growers in general in South Africa. And potatoes being a crop that is regulated in terms of levy collection. I was able to try and play my part in terms of bring transformation. I have since resigned from them due to work constraints mainly, but I've also participated in the grain sector bodies, and I'm still part of the developing farmers grain sector body called South African Grain Farmers Association, Agri.
Gift, we're losing you a little bit.
Producing body that seeks to, push of developing grain farmers, and we describe a developing experience. If he or she experiences one disaster, would not be able to plant the next crop. And it's not in terms of color, but by virtue of our industry, lines are pretty much clear. So what I have come across is the fact that our government does not prioritize agricultural development. If you look at from the point of research, our Agricultural Research Council's budget keeps on being cut every year. And there is a move, as Michael was earlier on, to privatize most of the development work in the sector. The government still remains intent benefit people that have already a higher level of commercial activities in the agriculture sector. So there is a great push for developing farmers from across all sectors, be it poultry, be it piggery, be it grain sector, vegetable sector, for government to make that
Gift, we're losing you.
Pro new entry into agriculture. I'll make an example. In the grain sector, we are trying to, is it a voice or is it a network? Mignon, can you hear me?
Yeah, a little better, yeah.
Okay. So an example would be to force industries to contribute towards monetary towards development initiatives in each industry, and that can mostly be done through levies, because then it would make initiatives to have to be well funded for transformation initiatives to be meaningful and impactful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Gift. We were losing you a little bit in the process of your explanations, but I got a few points, and I find this very interesting. Thank you so much. We got a few questions here, and because we're running a little bit out of time, I will ask one of them. I think one is coming from Noneng Debiela. The question is, will you please give an idea of the extent of your farming relationships? Example, bankers, attorneys, accountant, and input suppliers. Can you please give us an idea of that in a few seconds?
Well, we identify ourselves as middle-scale commercial farmers. In terms of banking, we we bank at district level with agribusiness divisions in two of the commercial banks. So concerning what, but we local town in Broncos Spring, that's where we are based, accountants. We use bookkeepers, and they will connect us to auditors that they prefer from time to time. And input suppliers, South Africa is, as Nono was saying, is a well-established sector. It has a well-established cultural sector. You get supplies almost at your doorstep for any product to save, avoid buying from retailers. It's possible to try and buy from manufacturers and through their sales channels.
Okay. Thank you so much, Gift. I think we have run a lot out of time, and I'm sorry that other questions may not be asked right now, but we can always direct them directly to Nourishing Africa, and we will connect you to Gift directly. I get back to you, Michael, for this wrap-up session. Thank you again, Gift, for your insightful comments.
Thanks very much. And for those colleagues, we apologize for running a little behind, but the conversations were quite engrossing, and we didn't want to cut off our speakers, our keynote or gift, because that's really the meat of our program, or the potato of our program. But we want to have a series of breakouts and offer you the opportunity to network. The 4 thematic areas are climate smart agriculture, intra-Africa and cross-continental trade, agricultural finance, and nutritious foods. And I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Cinda Gramini, who will just give you instructions for this networking session. Over to you, Cinda.
Thank you, Michael. Good afternoon, all. The breakout sessions are interactive sessions where you will get to share your experiences with the other participants. The sessions are moderated by various experts on key relevant discussion areas. The slide shows the 4 breakout topics, and a prompt should already appear on your screen asking you to join a room of your choice. So kindly join any room of your choice. This session lasts for about 30 minutes, after which we will return to the main session to take the closing remarks. Please ensure to have a great discussion and actively participate. Once again, we thank you all for your participation and efforts in making this roadshow a success. We look forward to engaging in the breakout room. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Host Michael has joined another call, and I'll just simply be taking the closing remarks. So I would like to take the vote of thanks while at it to really appreciate everyone, especially those of us who have stayed until the very end. We really appreciate you for taking the time to join us on this virtual roadshow. And I have no doubt that this experience, this event has been a great source of learning and motivation for us all. Like I mentioned, it's an honor to present this vote of thanks on this special day, and on behalf of Nourishing Africa, including the entire team, our supporters, partners, members, sponsors, I would like to extend a very hearty appreciation to all of the participants. I neglected to mention earlier, my name is Rahmat A. Fujo, and I'm co-CEO, co-founder at Nourishing Africa. And we really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. So to the Africa Business School and Wakanda Food Accelerator, I wanted to say a shout out. It's really a big honor working with you to organize this event, and we're grateful for the selfless support and facilitation. I also wanted to say a big thank you to Nasego for the insightful opening remarks that put us in an excited mood for the event. We're really immensely grateful to all the speakers and panelists, Nono, Portia, Miles, Gift, Cinda, Dr. Tracy, Josephine, and Mignon. Thank you for sharing such relevant and remarkable insights with us. I'm sure the participants agree with me that it was a great learning experience listening to you all. I also wanted to commend and appreciate the incredible Nourishing Africa team, and of course to our amazing members of the Nourishing Africa Hub for the hard work and commitment to developing the agri-food sector in Africa. Thank you for joining all of our roadshows. Thank you for taking action, and of course for being such incredible change agents for the transformation we all want to see in the sector. Thank you again to all of you participants, especially to you agri-food entrepreneurs. You are the drivers of the agriculture and food landscapes in Africa. You are the one who are creating changes. You are responsible for 80% of the food consumed and produced on the continent. And we want to encourage and empower you to actually continue on this drive. Despite all the challenges, you have continued to push across your innovation, and you are nourishing the continent. And I would like to say that if you have not joined the Nourishing Africa Hub, please join through the link that has been provided in the chat to connect with the Nourishing Africa community and the tons of resources we have for you on the Hub. Keep growing your agri-businesses, keep connecting, and never relent. Thank you all again. Do have a pleasant afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rahmat. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.